I think it was unique in a certain way. It had a certain honesty and grittiness that people enjoyed. It definitely has, held its own.
I want to get cut in half again, I think, in film. I mean, how many times do you get that? Yeah.
I remember the pet aisle. They had shelves and shelves and shelves of dog food, which spoiled during the course of the shoot, and it stunk to high heaven. It wasn't the most fragrant of places. Well, it was fragrant, but in a bad way.
Really, our star were the effects. And the amount of effects in that movie. I mean, my God, really, it was incredible.
Don't you see? I'm just crazy about this store.
Scott, in our high school days, had always directed. He had tons of these movies that he had done where he wrote, directed, so he was very involved. And then, Sam's his own powerhouse. We all grouped together in high school and did a bunch of movies together, and Scott would make movies in his neighborhood, and I'd work with Sam, and we'd make our own little movies. So Scott was always someone who always had directed. This was nothing really new, but the concept of getting your own money for a feature film, he saw us do it. He worked with us on Evil Dead 2. He moved to California right about that time, right about the time I did, and was like, I'm gonna write a horror film. And we had actually made it in Super 8 already. And I have to say, it was a good little Super 8 film. I shot it. I photographed. I was the cameraman of the Super 8 version of that movie.
I used to work in this little independent market. So we got to shoot there at night. And so we did a little 20-minute film, and it was kind of cool, It's, again, it was so low budget, I couldn't even do 10 little Indians in the supermarket. I did 3 little Indians. And basically we did this little short film. Foolishly, since back in the day, your only copy was Super 8, that's all you had. I lent it out to somebody and I never got it back. I don't know whatever happened. I can't believe I would be that stupid about that, but. Sam Raimi got his head sawed in half on the bandsaw, but from a different angle. And so that was pretty grim, but still Sam was hanging on a meat hook. Meanwhile, in the fall, of course, the boys started Evil Dead. Once those guys got Evil Dead mostly in the can, I mean, they were picking up scenes and additional scenes, for, over a period of time. But I think once they did that, then they realized, hey, you know what, another cool low-budget feature would be that they could produce would be Night Crew. It was kind of like, you just have a group of people in a supermarket and somebody picking them off. It's, it's very doable. But because Evil Dead just took as long as it did to get, from shooting into the theaters, I think there was just so many other projects coming up and everything else, and that I think they had to really concentrate on their next project. I mean, it wasn't until years later until Lawrence Bender came up to me. He goes, do you have a good low budget idea? Because I got like $100 grand I could get. I go, right here, sir.
I was on a search to figure out what I wanted to do in my life. And it wasn't civil engineering. I thought it was being a dancer. I mean, I knew it was that I wanted to be a dancer. That's in my heart was, I think, the most amazing part of my life. But I got injured too many times. I started too late. And then I found acting, and acting was extraordinary for me. And then so it was like a series of choices. I make a choice, I follow it to the end of that sort of path. It abruptly ended, but it forced me to go take another choice and then another choice. And eventually, these series of choices led me to this feeling of, producing movies. And it turns out that that's something that I had an affinity for. Scott had co-written Evil Dead 2, And I was in this Sam Raimi world of the Evil Dead movies and this cool, horror, comedy, really cool filmmaking guys. And so we started talking, and we came up with this idea of doing this movie, Intruder, Night Crew. And Scotty wrote it. And I said, cool, man, let's go do this.
And the next thing you know, I think Lawrence knew a guy named Jerry Pfeiffer who did all those, he just did a lot of kind of low budget kind of stuff. And look, along the way, we got more money. Then Charlie Band became involved.
I guess my role more than anything else was liking the project and funding the project and then releasing the film. This was back when I had a company called Empire. This was before Full Moon. I was very involved in a lot of the productions. This was one that was more done on the outside or from the outside. I was friendly at the time with Sam Raimi and Rob Tappert. We'd known each other for some years, and they came to me saying, hey, we got this great project, and would you want to fund it and release it, because it's right up your alley. And I said, yeah, let's do it. And like all these things, it was a blink of an eye we were shooting.
There you go. Thanks a lot.
We're like, okay, the whole thing takes place in a grocery store. So we're looking at grocery stores, we're driving around LA, and we found a grocery store in I think it was Bell, California. And somehow, it was closed down. I don't know how we did it, but somehow we found the manager of the store. And the owner was on vacation, was gone. So we said to the manager, look, let us give you a couple $1,000, and you could open up the doors, and we'll go in, we'll be out before the owner comes back. And he says, cool. So we made a deal. I think it was $2,500 for the use of the entire grocery store. But it was a grocery store that had no shelves. I mean, the shelves, but nothing on the shelves. And it was all dirty. And somehow I figured out that we go to Ralph's Spoilage Warehouse. And we said, look, can we just take a couple tons, I think it was 2 5-ton truckloads of their spoiled goods that they were sent to charities, that they dented boxes and dented, stuff that was still edible, but they couldn't sell in a regular store. So it's like, we made a deal for $1,000. We had these 2 5-ton truckloads of dented boxes and cans, and that we diverted that for a few weeks to the grocery store.
Once we found that location, half our battle was won. Now it was just trying to get the best movie you could in the can for the time and the money.
Well, Bill and I, we've agreed to sell the store to the city, and your jobs will end about the 1st of next month. However,
the casting was great. But we went through a whole the Raimi brothers and so forth were in the movie. But we did it like a regular casting process. We had people come in and go in, and we had the scream test. Scotty, before the girl would leave, he said, okay, now we're going to do a scream test. Look in the camera and scream, like blood-curdling scream. Believe it or not, yes, the girl I was dating ended up getting the lead in the movie. Sounds very cliche, Elizabeth Cox, but I think you would ask the director, he's like, for some reason, she ended up being the one that he ended up liking the best. I would have never forced that upon him. And he ended up choosing her, not me, actually.
Walnut Lake Market, this is Jennifer. Hello.
It was actually really hard because I was his girlfriend, they weren't really open to giving me the part, so I really had to jump through hoops to get it. And I had to do a number of auditions, and they chose me. And I remember when I was doing the movie that I had to work on screams because we had so many different screams during this movie. If you see all the different blood and gore scenes, there are bodies everywhere. And so I remember having to do a lot of scream choices. I actually have that in my script where I wrote down different ideas for screams to keep it different, to keep it, just energized. And so it wouldn't be the same thing because that's all I did in the movie was find bodies and scream. So I have something I call BIM scream, high C, which is after my sister because she was a soprano. So it was like, ah! we had the whistle scream. So number 2 was the whistle scream. That's like, and it was like whistle sounds, like intermittent sounds. Then we had the tarantula scream. Now, I hate spiders, so it's like, and then we had the suck-in scream, which was like, so those are a number of the screams. So we try to make each one different.
Don't answer that. This guy is a total creep.
Renee was sweet, and she had done Sleepaway Camp, I think, or one of those movies. So she was really a nice person. We only had a scene or two together, but it was fun. Burr Steers has gone on to do, you know, all these different movies. I guess he's working with Zac Efron now. And at the time, he was playing kind of this goofy, you know, whatever, kind of stoned character.
Hey, who is that? Tim? Tim, I know it's you.
I didn't know about the whole Evil Dead cult, even though coming from New York, I remember it had been playing at the 4th Street Cinema on the midnight show for years. So I was sort of putting it together as we were going forward. But it's amazing how many people were around that set and went on to have big Hollywood careers. And of course, I mean, Sam's, you know, the Beatles, he's huge.
Hey, asswipe, cut it out! Oh, it hurts. Hey, Dave, throw me your cutter.
Get your own cutter.
Just let me have it. Mine broke.
I think Scott would give you an example, and he was an amazing mimic, and in that way would sort of lead you where he wanted you to go with the character. But he was open to, you know, improvisation and was really easygoing about it.
Oh, wow, it's Tim. What a surprise.
Burr Steers was my roommate at the time. And, you know, everyone was really friendly. Teddy was friendly. I remember, you know, between Ted and Sam, I think it was, you know, it's funny to think, Ted and Sam and Scott, you know, they do the corniest jokes ever, you know, and you know, at the first you sit there, you go, what, you know, but then you realize it's like Three Stooges moment, you know, I mean, those guys loved all those slapstick stuff. So, you know, it was a crack up, you know, nobody was really nervous or pressured to do anything. It was like, be yourself, and that was really nice, you know. Sam, I remember being, you know, I think I remember seeing him kind of like worried about what he was doing, and I thought, man, that's cool, because, you know, I'm worried about what I'm doing.
It was a really pure time. It was a very, I think, innocent time to see these guys do what they did. And it was neat because you're seeing the beginnings of these long careers that have just blossomed.
Who's there?
Danny was scary. You know, he's just like, I'm just crazy about that store. You're like, okay, you're psycho.
It was great working with Danny Hicks, and the one thing I remember specifically about Danny Hicks was he did a great gay John Wayne imitation. And I won't do this justice, but I think it was from the Cowboys, and it was, I did a lot of things in that room with little Timmy I reckon I'm not too proud of. Little Timmy seemed to enjoy it. It's a bad imitation of Danny doing an imitation, but I remember that.
Don't you see? I'm just crazy about this store.
Well, the character of Bill was in Intruder. To me, what made it so fascinating is that he starts out as such a nice guy. You know, he's almost like everybody's favorite uncle. And then, of course, you find out that there's just something not right there, you know. He's just crazy about that store, just crazy. And that's, to me, what was so cool is to be able to do that. It's because the role is a bit of a stretch for most actors, and that's what I found challenging about it and interesting about it, and a lot of fun to do.
Well, what happened was, we was all sitting around the station one evening having dinner, and we got this call that there'd been an accident out of 9 Mile Middle Belt. So we all dropped what we was eating and run out of the station. Well, that is everybody except for goddamn Parker. Took his hamburger right with him.
It's a very good speech, and I tell it twice. I tell it once in the lunchroom, and then I act it out again later with, "Here comes fucking Parker, walking down 9 Mile, swinging the head by the hair in one hand, his sandwich in the other, and he's still eating it." It's just, what a horrible, horrible thing to say. So how can you go too far overboard when you got writing like that? The most painful thing I went through in Intruder was there's a scene where I have to slam my head through a phone booth and break the glass with my head. Well, even though it was candy glass, it was still a ½ inch thick. And I think we'd been working for 10 or 12 hours. Everybody was tired. So we get ready to do that scene. Scotty says action, and I go charging in and headbutt this phone booth, and I bounced off of it. And I thought, oh my God, it hurt. I had such a bad headache. And then it dawned on me, oh boy, I get to do this again, and I have to do it harder. So sometimes you have to suffer for your art. So I just gritted my teeth and charged at it like a bull, and that time it broke. And, rocking it over and tipping it over, that was physical. And we went through that quite a few times because the actress was supposed to crawl out of the hole I made, and she was having trouble. She couldn't get out fast enough. So after about the 5th or 6th time we did this, I bit her on the ass. And I told Scotty, I said, I bet you she gets out in the next take, because if she don't, I'm gonna bite her again. It had been a long day. And I might have been a little cranky at that point. But it worked. She got out.
Help me!
We had to make the decision that we need our friends. We love Danny. They'll work for us. Renee Estevez. Everybody was on board. So we lucked out. We really lucked out. Billy Marty was great. Everybody got it. It was really wonderful. And Lawrence ran such a tight ship. Casting was just and Burr Steers. I remember, Scott Burr needs to talk to you. I'm like, really? And like, it was just, he was nervous. He just needed to talk and stuff like that. And, you know, I was like, oh crap, yeah, that's right. This is like his first big movie, I guess, as an actor, I suppose. So it was just kind of like, excellent. And I was learning, it was my first movie as director, so there you have it. But Sam Raimi was very conscientious about his performance. Very well. He was like, hey, is everything I got? Yeah, you're cool, man, you're cool, you know? If I'm not saying anything, you're doing all good, you know? So everybody was just awesome, really incredible.
Scotty is like Sam or like Bruce Campbell as a director. If you've got a good idea, he's more than happy to listen to it and work with you. So I'm sure that Scott and I worked on a lot of this stuff, and a lot of the stuff that you see in the film wasn't actually in the script. Because like I said, Scotty, Bruce Campbell, Sam Raimi, if you've got a good idea, they'll use it, they'll work with you.
Working with Scott, you know, I found, like it being my first experience with movie making, it's like I thought what he was doing with detail I found very interesting. You know, I enjoyed Scott's work. You know, he always surprised me with how. I mean, he may be nervous and he may be pressured, but he doesn't really, you know, give all that to his actors. He was like, it was like, do what you can do and have fun with it. You know, which is very rare.
What I learned on Intruder. Scott had a great set, a really collaborative set, and he would always speak to you in a conversational way. So you didn't have, he just made it a very relaxed atmosphere, and he set the tone through the conversation that he would have with you. And he's a hyper guy, really energetic, really, really creative, and he would calm himself down to make sure that you were calm, and he was very clear on what he wanted, and he sort of always trying to get an angle on your face as he was talking to you.
I think Scott was a really good technical director, and I remember having to cry in a bucket for one scene and trying to make the tear drop into the bucket at the exact angle, you know, that he wanted it to be. And so some of those things were tricky, and it was very much a technical. I think he wasn't quite as much of an actor's director as let's get the point of view of this, and you know, and can he act while you're doing it? So Scott was the POV man. Point of view of telephone, point of view of, you know, of hatchet. One of the scenes we have to hold the knife just so you could see the reflection of the killer in the knife, or somebody in the knife. And it was so funny because it was a very technical movie. And I look back at it and I appreciate how much he worked to get those scenes to look good.
Look here, shithead, if you call her one more... Linda? Oh, Teddy.
You know, Scott is very specific. You talk about crazy shots. I mean, Scott does like wastebasket POVs and, you know, mouth POVs, any kind of point of view shot he can do. Phone cord POVs, I mean, anything. Scott had probably the most ridiculous shots I've ever seen.
Scott Spiegel is a guy who, if he wasn't directing pictures now and producing pictures now, could easily have been a gag man if he were born 70 years earlier. He could have been a professional gag man. He's one of these rare guys who can see like 3 objects and just come up with a joke about them. He's that talented. His mind is that sharp and quick. It's interesting to see guys like that do directorial stuff because it really translates over. He's very specific. He's thinks really hard about things, and nothing on any of Scotty's movies seems to me to be insignificant insofar as the frames or how he cuts the picture. He seems to really like the horror genre, but I think Scotty can do anything he wants.
I met Scott quite a few times. We talk about how to move the camera. We move the camera all the time. There was a lot of handheld. We came up with a lot of crazy stuff during pre-production. I mean, in the meetings with Scott, Scott was always like in this intensity of himself. And, you know, we came up basically with a lot of camera move. And then we put the camera in the most strangest places. I mean, I don't remember if we put it inside a cereal box, but I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, the camera was everywhere. Conveyor belts, I remember myself on the conveyor belt just sitting with that camera and 1,000 magazines like going down and up and everywhere.
The violence is really, really crazy. I mean, I can't believe how much gore there is. I mean, it's weird. I mean, I'm happy. I'm glad the film, but it's way bloodier and gorier than I remember. There's blood and there's stuff everywhere, man. What's going on with that movie? I don't know. I'm like very surreal. It's like, wait, did I really have anything to do with this? I guess I did. I became friendly with Greg and Howard, all those, and Bob on Evil Dead 2, because they were doing all of the effects with Mark Sjostrom, but they were Mark's guys, and we had a lot of we just had fun. So when I went to do Intruder, I went, well, I can't afford those guys, but maybe they know somebody who's more affordable.
Scotty Spiegel called and said, hey man, so doing this movie called Intruder, and I need a couple kids that can just do a couple gags for me in like their basement. And I said, well, you know, Scott, you know, Howard and Bob and I have been wanting to sort of start this company, but it's a catch-22. Nobody will give you your first gig until you have done your first gig. You can't supervise the effects on a movie until you've supervised the effects on a movie. So nobody will ever extend that olive branch to you. So we were at a very strange place where we were trying to figure out how to get our first gig.
I think we each got $700. That was it. Bob, Greg, and myself each got $700 from Scotty. And that paid for our labor and materials and set work and all that stuff. I handled the Sam Raimi stuff where he's the butcher and gets the hook in his throat. So I cast Sam, got him in, did a head cast, did the resculpt in my house, molded it, ran a couple gelatin heads, did the hair work, punched the brows and lashes and all that crazy stuff, and then went to set and did that. I was on set a couple times. Bob did a lot of set work. Greg did a bunch of set work. And we literally just pulled a bunch of stuff out. I think our big gag was, and Bob did this, was the kid on the bandsaw.
It was a chance to do some cool stuff. I mean, the bandsaw head, I got to make the bandsaw head and chop it. It was made out of gelatin with a core in it filled with blood, and pushed it across the real bandsaw and chopped it up, and it was all stuff we worked on at night. We were Deep Star 6 during the day, and working out of we had this little shop at night that we worked out of, and it was kind of about 800 square feet. It was kind of the first K&B shop, and had an oven the size of a regular stove. It wasn't big at all, and we were just in there all night doing. We were young, so we could stay up 24/7 and do that kind of stuff, but can't do that now. It's like
it killed my relationship at the time. It killed everything at the time, because that was it. I mean, I was 23 years old, maybe 24 years old, and we were kind of at this point where it's like, that's all we knew how to do. We didn't know how to do anything else, do makeup effects, and it was a great opportunity for us.
Bob, Greg, and Howard, they were all they came to the location, they saw it, we talked about, because that was a big point of contention, because in the Super 8 version, we sawed Sam's head on the bandsaw right through the part in his hair and the skull. And on this, I remember, I think it was Bob and Greg are like, dude, we can make that head look so cool, so if you put the bandsaw right through here, you'll see teeth and everything. And you're going, really? And it's like you want to believe them, and you're like, well, the stuff you did on Evil Dead 2, man, let's go for it, man, because you guys are rocking, man. And they did it, and I'm like, oh my God, it's the most headache-inducing scene. He's just like, oh, why is it so real?
It looked so real that the makeup artist at the time actually left the set crying because it freaked her out so much that she watched this happen. She left in tears.
I remember, as far as the special effects guys go, being terrified because I was getting my head crushed in a trash compactor, that I was going to have a mold put on my head and be breathing through my nose. But luckily we were able to use somebody else's head.
The funniest thing during the whole movie, though, is we needed a little insert of a chicken being cut, like in pieces on the bandsaw. And so I just did a quick insert, I think I was doubling for Sam, who played the butcher, actually. And everybody turned like, how did you learn? Of course, I worked in a grocery store, so how did you learn to do that? And I'm like, wow, because I'd always be nervous. Like, I would never do that in a million years, because I was always nervous, like the chicken skin would get caught and they like the saw and pull it down and pull I'm like, I can't believe it. But everybody was just marveling at my skill. I'm like, anyway, silly sideline there. Anyway. Sorry for the foul remark.
Good evening, Walnut Lake shoppers.
It's closing time.
The store will be closing in 15 minutes.
But the night crew still has work to do.
The only thing at the end that was really bummer was that we shot this on a 35 millimeter. And we always saw this as a big theatrical release. And at the end of the day, the company, basically sold it to, I believe it was Paramount Home Video for a period of time. And so it went directly to video.
Empire was having its problems, and we were involved with a relationship with a bank, and they were moving chess pieces around, and they basically said, look, we would prefer for you to step away. You can step away with certain projects. and the rights to certain films. Intruder was one of those films that left with me. There were others at the time, and notably Cannibal Women in the Avocado Jungle of Death with Bill Maher and Adrienne Barbeau. So when I started off with Full Moon, the first official Full Moon film was Puppet Master. It was the first Puppet Master. But prior to that, just prior to that, with a new relationship with Paramount, we released several of the movies that were originally going to be Empire films, and turned out we put them under a different label, and they came out and were distributed by Paramount, Intruder being one of them.
I think I believe we originally called it Night Crew, and I think that they changed it to Intruder because they thought that that may be a more commercial name. And at first we were like, what a drag, and then we got used to it, and I think it became fine with it after that.
You know, it's funny, we were saddled at the time, even in the earlier days of Empire. First, they had to be rated, and the rating had to, at the time, the MPAA, very different today, you know, probably some of the more best shots on all my movies are pretty much lost today, have pretty much hit the cutting room floor, unfortunately, because the MPAA was much more strict back in the day, and shots that would totally pass today in a PG-13 film, you know, were cut. And it really is too bad. Again, the world's gotten crazier and more violent, and you know, stuff you see on TV today is pretty R-rated. But yeah, the answer is that was the only way we could get it out.
The ratings board coming out of the slasher genre, they just gutted everything. Like any movie, even if there was a hint of a gore gag in it, they'd cut it out.
I was aware of the fact that it was very heavily cut because of Fangoria magazine. I mean, there were people that were just outraged that this movie had been destroyed. You know, it was cut so bad that it didn't even make sense to get rid of some of the more horrific scenes, in fact, just about all the scenes. So that it was, at one point, I guess it was almost nonsensical because you didn't know what happened to these characters. They're just gone.
We were a bit disappointed early on, you know, when the movie came out and our stuff was on the cutting room floor. And it was the first time that it happened, you know, to us to that extent. Over the years, I've gotten used to it, you know, and you kind of know now what you're going to get away with. It was hard because it took years and years and years before anybody actually put out the restored footage version, you know, so.
Quentin Tarantino had one of the coolest ideas ever. He's like, I don't know how copacetic or kosher actually this could be in the sense, but he's like, you know what? You just go to those video stores that have the cut version and you just tape over the uncut version. I'm like, back in the day, and I'm like, really? I never did do that. I thought about it anyway, but I thought that was a cool idea, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, yeah, I'll show those guys.
We didn't do it! Shut up! Ow!
You lost another vehicle, code 3, trying to... Leave it alone!
I feel extremely slighted and very upset that Bruce Campbell got the this big thing at the end of the movie, and you know, where he went off to make many movies. I personally did not, and as the cop in Intruder, did not launch my career as an actor, and I was very upset about that for many years. And even to this day, I don't think I'd quite get over that.
You know, it was sort of like those guys making a movie in Michigan, but they just happened to be in LA and get a couple of other additional friends in. You know, Scotty was so enthusiastic and so excited about shooting those gags to the fullest extent, and his intention always was that they were in there.
I think I know where Craig might be hiding.
Where?
It was the first movie I did. It got me in SAG, it got me in the union, it got me working. And just got me in the business and just being on the set and learning. But it's such a vivid memory and was such a great experience.
Brain hemorrhage.
For me, at the beginning, there's a whole nexus of relationships with this movie because Scotty ultimately introduced me to Quentin Tarantino. Without Scotty introducing Quentin and I would never have met, and we probably never made all those movies together.
it all started with Scott. But it's interesting because Lawrence Bender had produced that film, who's Quentin's producer. And that was our first experience with Lawrence. And then we met Quentin, and then, so Scotty really was responsible, for K&B getting its heels dug in the dirt.
The fact that anybody even remembers this stuff with all the material and all the movies and all the entertainment, everything that's out there, I feel I'm privileged, I'm lucky. So I'm a happy camper. I'm just glad that we're here being interviewed, man. That's cool to me.
Well, I'm proud of it. I'm proud of the work I did in it. There are bits and pieces that I think that might be the best stuff that I've ever done on film. Little tiny things, that very subtle. I know there's not too much subtlety in the character of Bill, but what I don't understand is why don't we make the sequel? I'm ready.
Who knows, Maybe Intruder 2 will come out sometime, and it's like, stay-at-home mom turns scream queen. I mean, nowadays, the only time I scream is when I'm trying to get my kids to eat their peas.
Oh, Bill Roberts could be anywhere. Well, actually, he's right here. He's just, he's here. He's waiting.